The desert wind howled like a caged animal, tugging at the canvas roof of the stagecoach as it rattled to a stop outside a sun-baked ranch. Clara Bellamy pressed a gloved hand to the glass, squinting past the dust toward the weather-beaten house that stood alone in the emptiness, its shadow stretching across dry earth, cracked like old porcelain. There were no trees, no voices, only the creak of a swinging gate and the slow approach of a man on horseback. Elijah Crane dismounted with the stiff grace of someone used to pain. He looked older than the photograph Clara had received, taller, too, with broad shoulders wrapped in a worn duster and a face carved from stone. His eyes, a pale gray, held neither joy nor regret as he stepped forward. He offered no hand, no words, just a nod. Clara stepped down with the help of the driver, clutching her satchel tight. The air was sharper here, thinner somehow, as though the land itself demanded something in return for every breath. She smoothed her skirts, stood tall, and stared back at the man who was meant to be her husband. "You're Elijah Crane," she said, steady but formal. The man gave a short nod. "You're Clara Bellamy." They stood in silence as the stagecoach rattled off behind her, wheels kicking up orange dust. It took her future with it, or maybe her escape. She wasn't sure which. Inside the house, everything was plain, neat, sparse. A rocking chair beside a cold fireplace, a cot in the corner of what might pass for a parlor, and at the center, a table with 2 plates already set. Clara noticed the absence of color. No curtains, no photographs, just wooden walls and the scent of coffee long since gone bitter. "I assumed you'd be hungry," Elijah said without looking at her. Clara sat, unwilling to let the silence win. "You haven't asked me anything. Not about the trip. Not about the wedding. Not even about the dress I brought." He didn't flinch. Didn't figure it mattered. Clara's fork froze above her plate. "You sent letters," she said. "You wrote me poetry." "Not poetry," Elijah muttered. "Just words." Clara dropped the fork. "Words are supposed to mean something." That night, she lay awake on a narrow bed in the room Elijah said used to belong to his sister. The walls whispered with the desert wind, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled like something grieving. Clara stared at the ceiling until the dark felt too heavy. She got up and opened the window, breathing in the bitter scent of sagebrush and dust. She saw him then, sitting by the corral. A lantern flickered beside him, casting long shadows over his back as he carved something into a block of wood with a steady hand. A quiet man in a loud land. There was something gentle in the way he handled the knife, but not in the way he looked at her. The next morning, Clara packed her things. "I can't marry you," she said, standing by the door with her satchel in hand. Elijah looked up from where he was mending a saddle. "Because I'm not what you expected." "Because you don't care," she said. "Because this house has more ghosts than warmth. Because you speak like a man who's already buried too much to make room for anything living." His jaw twitched. "Then you were never meant for this place." "No," she said. "Maybe I wasn't. But I came. I tried. And I won't stay just to vanish quietly like everything else out here." Elijah didn't answer. Clara stepped outside and didn't look back. She walked the long dirt road toward town, hoping someone would pass her, or that she might find a telegraph office, or a stage, anything. But the road was empty, and the wind was rising. She didn't hear the riders at first. Hooves thundered over the rise, like a storm breaking. For men, faces hidden by bandanas, rifles slung low, swept down the road, like shadows on horseback. Clara froze, her breath stolen by fear before she could scream. One of them dismounted and grabbed her by the arm. She fought, kicked, clawed at his face, but the others closed in. The last thing she saw before the burlap sack came down over her head was the edge of the sky turning gold with fire. Back at the ranch, Elijah heard the shots too late. He found the gate swinging wide, the water trough overturned, Clara's satchel torn open in the dust, pages of her letters flapping like wounded birds. Blood marked the porch rail, just a smear. A warning. Elijah didn't cry out. He didn't rush after them. He just stood there, as the wind carried Clara's locket silver, heart-shaped, into the dust at his feet. The sheriff arrived an hour later, puffing through his mustache and muttering about Kestrel's gang. Said they'd taken others. Said it wasn't worth chasing them, just like the last girl and the one before. Said it was better to grieve and forget. But Elijah didn't respond. He took the locket, slid it into his coat, and stared down the trail where the dust still hadn't settled. 3 days later, in a boarding house in New York, a telegram arrived. Clara Bellamy. Taken. No leads. If your kin, reply. Lucy Bellamy read it twice. Then she folded it with steady hands, stood up from the chair where she'd been mending laundry, and reached for her coat. She had never been west. She didn't know the ranch, the man, or the country, but she knew her sister, and she was going. The train hissed like a snake ready to strike as it pulled into the dry edge of a place that barely qualified as a town. Lucy Bellamy stepped down with a single satchel slung over her shoulder and a revolver tucked where no one could see. Her coat was dusty from the journey, her boots stiff from city stone, but her gaze scanned the horizon like a scout bred for it. She was smaller than Clara, but where Clara had walked softly, Lucy walked like someone who had long ago stopped asking permission. The land hit her all at once, wide and brutal, soaked in sun and silence. The air held no perfume, no smoke from chimneys, just heat and dust and the breathless vastness of the West. She found a horse waiting by the post office, just as the man had promised in his telegram. A boy stood beside it, maybe 10 years old, eyes too old for his face. He said to ride straight. The boy mumbled, "Don't talk to no one, and don't stop if you hear anything strange on the wind." Lucy mounted without a word. She reached the ranch before sundown. It looked as she imagined, lonely, wind-battered, the front porch shaded like a stage before a ghost show. A man emerged from the barn, limping slightly, a shotgun balanced in one hand like it belonged there. He didn't wave. He didn't speak. But she knew him. "Elijah Crane," she said, dismounting. His eyes narrowed. "You're not Clara." "No," she said, tightening the strap on her satchel. "I'm the one who came to get her back." He looked her over, not with suspicion, but with a soldier's caution, the kind that measures weight and reach, threat and intention. "You shouldn't be here." "Then you shouldn't have sent that telegram," she answered. Inside, the house had not changed. Still quiet, still hollow. Lucy walked through it slowly, taking stock. No women's things, no signs of struggle. But in the corner, leaning by the hearth, were maps, dog-eared, marked in charcoal, circled in red. She turned to find him watching. "You've been tracking them," she said. He nodded. "They move in shadows. Canyon country. Bandits don't travel in straight lines." Lucy stepped closer, squinting at the markings. "You think she's still alive?" His pause was a whisper of wind. "I know she is." Lucy dropped her satchel by the table. "Then we ride at dawn." Elijah stared at her. "You're not a fighter." "I know what a Colt .45 can do in a steady hand," she replied. "And I've fired one more times than I've written my own name." He didn't argue. Not out loud. The next morning, they rode without speaking. The land unfurled before them, pale gold in the early light, and Lucy saw how this place swallowed weakness. There were no straight roads, only trails through broken earth and sunburned scrub. She rode well, better than he expected, and kept pace without complaint. By midday, they reached an abandoned trading post, where Elijah watered the horses and carved another notch in a fence post already covered in them. "What are those?" Lucy asked. "Places they've been. Places they've passed through. One for every soul they've taken." She knelt beside the old ashes in the fire pit. "Why haven't you gone after them already?" His silence was heavy. "I buried someone once," he said finally. "Her name was Aya. Comanche. She saved my life, then paid for it. Lawmen came, said she was an enemy. I didn't stop them. Been riding with that weight ever since. Took me a long time to pick up a rifle again." Lucy looked up. "You sent for Clara. You let her come. Why?" "I didn't think she'd stay," he said. "Didn't think anyone would." "She didn't," Lucy said, standing. "But I'm here now." By the time the sun dropped behind the red rocks, they were deep in canyon land. Shadows moved like secrets between the stones, and the air cooled into something sharp and uncertain. They made camp near a dry streambed, where the only sounds were the horses shifting and the quiet scrape of Elijah's knife against wood. Lucy unrolled a blanket and sat across from him. "You know they might kill her just to make a point." "I know. And you're still going?" "Yes." She nodded slowly. "Then I'm still with you." He didn't respond, but he reached into his coat and handed her a folded map. "They were last seen near Broken Tooth Pass. There's a trail few know about, a place where riders vanish without sound." Lucy studied the path marked in ink. Her fingers traced a spot Clara's name had been scrawled beside. Just initials, really. CB inside a small circle. She lay down under the stars that night and listened to the wind scraping through the rocks. It didn't cry like in the East. It whispered. It warned. It told stories that had no end. In the morning, they followed a narrow ridge cut into the side of a ravine. Buzzards circled in the sky, and more than once, Lucy caught sight of boot prints too fresh for comfort. She crouched beside one, touching the edge of it with her hand. 4 horses, she said. One lighter with smaller hooves. He looked at her, surprised. "You read prints?" "I used to follow drunk men back to their gambling halls when I needed a payout," she said with a shrug. "Out here, I just listen harder." Before he could answer, she spotted something in the brush ahead. A strip of fabric, red and frayed, tied to the branch of a brittle mesquite. She rode toward it, eyes narrowing. Clara's scarf. Lucy plucked it loose, held it to her nose. Faint perfume. Sweat. Hope. "She's close," she said, voice hoarse. "She left this for us." But Elijah was staring past her, toward a narrow gap between 2 stone walls that shimmered with heat. "That's Dead Mare Pass," he said quietly. "They took a marshal's son through there once. Only the horse came back." Lucy tied the scarf to her saddle horn. "We're not horses," she said, "and we're not turning back." Elijah met her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded, drew his rifle, and urged his horse forward. Behind them, the wind picked up again, whispering low, as if the desert itself had just remembered their names. They entered Dead Mare Pass under the weight of silence, as if even the rocks had learned to hold their breath. The air thickened with each step their horses took, until the shadows between the canyon walls swallowed the sun itself. The path narrowed to a throat of stone, winding between jagged cliffs that offered no retreat. Lucy kept her hand near her revolver, her eyes flicking between ledges above and loose gravel below. She didn't trust quiet in a place known for ambushes. Elijah's rifle stayed balanced across his lap, and his gaze swept the heights like he knew which ridges bore blood. "They watch from above," he murmured. "Wait until your back's turned." "They won't get the chance," Lucy said. The canyon opened abruptly into a basin, flat, scorched earth bordered by thorn brush and broken fences. A few burned wagons lay scattered like bones, and beyond them, nestled against the rock like a wound that never healed, was a makeshift camp. Ramshackle tents, 2 lean-to shelters, smoke rising from a central fire pit. A rust-colored flag flapped lazily on a pole. Lucy spotted 4 men, one tall with a wide-brimmed hat and a long rifle strapped to his back, another sharpening a knife on a rock, the third crouched by the fire with a bottle in hand, his laugh sharp and dry. The 4th leaned against a post, older, slower, eyes clouded but watching. And then she saw her, Clara, tied to one of the lean-to's support beams, arms bound, lips chapped and eyes rimmed red. She looked thinner, paler, her dress torn and dusty, but her chin still lifted like she wouldn't let them see her break. Lucy's heart twisted in her chest, but she didn't move. Not yet. Elijah dismounted slowly, tying his horse to a low bush. "We wait until nightfall." "We can't," Lucy said, voice tight. "They could." "They won't hurt her unless they need to," he interrupted. "She's bait, and we're the prey." She stared at him, jaw tight. "So what's your plan?" "I go down," he said. "Say I've come alone. Offer myself in trade. They won't believe you." "They'll want to," he replied. "Outlaws like a story. They like the idea of a man giving himself up for a woman." Lucy hesitated. "And me? You stay high." Left ridge. If it turns, you shoot. You sure about that? She asked. His voice was level. You'll know the moment it turns. The sun crept low as they took position. Lucy climbed silently, boots gripping sandstone, every breath calculated. She reached the ridge and went prone behind a cluster of brush, pistol drawn. From here, she had a clear view of the camp. Clara's figure barely moved, but her eyes scanned the horizon like she was waiting for something. Elijah stepped into the basin at dusk. He walked with no rifle, hands open at his sides. The bandits stood slowly, their faces sharpening with suspicion and cruel humor. "Well now," said the tall one with the wide-brimmed hat, stepping forward. "A ghost come to beg. Ain't that a thing?" "I'm here for the girl," Elijah said. The knife man spat. "You lost her already. Why come back just to die slower?" "I'm offering myself," Elijah said. "Trade her for me." The old one barked a laugh. "You think we want you?" "I killed 2 of yours down at Bramble Creek," Elijah replied. Took a third's eye. The tall man's smile vanished. He stepped forward, the air tensing like a bowstring. "You're the one they called Crane the Gray," he said, voice low. "Used to ride with the scouts. Led raids through Comanche country. You're that bastard." "I'm just a man now," Elijah said, "but I've come to pay." The firelight danced in the outlaw's eyes. "Strip your coat. Toss the knife." Elijah obeyed. Lucy's finger twitched near the trigger. Every part of her screamed to fire, to end it now. But Elijah had said wait. So she did, heart pounding like thunder in her ears. The tall outlaw approached Clara, grabbed her chin roughly. "You worth all this fuss, sweetheart?" She didn't blink. "I'm worth burying you for." He grinned, shoved her head back, then turned to Elijah. "All right, legend. You got your trade." Then he raised his rifle. Elijah dove. A shot rang out, echoing off the cliffs. Dust kicked up beside Clara's feet. Lucy fired before she breathed. Her bullet struck the knife man in the shoulder, sending him sprawling. The one by the fire reached for his gun. Another shot, and he fell backward into the flames. The tall one whirled, but Elijah was already on him, tackling him to the ground with a guttural roar. Lucy scrambled down the ridge, firing twice more, one miss. One hit to the knee of the older man as he reached for a hidden weapon. She hit the basin floor running, revolver empty, boots skidding in the dust. Elijah had the tall man pinned, punching with everything years of grief and rage could lend him. Clara cried out, "Lucy!" just as the last outlaw rose behind her with a hatchet. Lucy spun, swung her empty pistol like a club, catching him in the jaw. He staggered. She kicked his knee out and brought the weapon down again, this time with both hands. He didn't rise. Elijah stood over the now limp body of the tall man, chest heaving, blood on his knuckles. He turned to Clara, cut the ropes quickly. Clara fell into his arms, gasping. Lucy reached them, bent low. "You all right?" Clara nodded, barely. "You came. You left a trail," Lucy said, brushing hair from her sister's face. "I followed it." Sirens of silence replaced the battle sounds. The fire hissed with one outlaw's spilled whiskey, and the canyon felt hollow again. The bandits, those who still breathed, groaned softly but didn't move. Elijah helped Clara to her feet. "We need to go," he said. Lucy looked at the narrow pass behind them. "Think they have friends?" "I know they do," he said. And in the twilight, as the sisters supported each other and Elijah gathered the fallen rifles, the wind blew again, low and long, carrying the scent of smoke and the promise that this fight was not yet over. They rode hard through the night, hooves drumming against dry earth as the stars wheeled above like watchful eyes. No one spoke much. Clara was weak but clung to the saddle, arms wrapped tight around Lucy's waist. Elijah led, his silhouette stoic against the moonlight, every movement silent and measured. He didn't ask if they were being followed. He knew they were. Bandits didn't lose kin without swearing revenge, and those who fled the canyon would come back hungry for blood. By sunrise, they reached a narrow ravine scattered with scrub pines and dry creeks. A shallow cave carved into the side of the rock offered brief shelter. Elijah dismounted first, scanning the horizon with a hunter's stare, then helped Clara down with a gentleness that almost didn't suit him. "She needs water and rest," he said, voice rough. Lucy unslung her canteen and knelt beside her sister, pressing it to Clara's lips. "I'm fine," Clara whispered. "You're not," Lucy said, "but you will be." They stayed hidden through midday, sleeping in shifts, guns close at hand, buzzards circled far off, and the wind whispered stories only the land remembered. Clara dozed, face nestled in Lucy's lap, while Elijah cleaned a rifle with slow precision. "She fought," Lucy said quietly. "She always had more steel than she let on," Elijah murmured. "You too." Lucy studied him. "Why did you come?" He didn't look up. "Because I owed something. To her. To you." "You didn't owe us anything," she said. "No," he admitted. "But I owed myself." He said no more, and Lucy didn't press. But something in the way he sat, back straight yet weary, made her wonder how much of his life had been shaped by debts no one else could see. By dusk, Clara could walk with help, and they moved eastward toward Dry Bend, a hamlet barely big enough for a post office and a single saloon. It was where the marshal ran messages to the larger townships, and if they made it there, they could summon help. But as the plains opened again, something changed. Elijah slowed his horse, nostrils flaring. "Smoke," he said. "Two trails. Both recent." Lucy saw it too, faint wisps rising against the darkening sky. "From the east and the south. They're cutting us off," she said. "They're not just chasing," Elijah said. "They're hurting." He turned to Lucy. "You ride with Clara. Head north. Don't stop until you find the Silver Creek Bend. There's a church outpost there. Tell them what happened." Lucy stared at him. "And you?" "I'll draw them away." "No," she said. "We're not leaving you." "I'm not asking," he said. "You don't get to." "You came to trade your life for your sister," he said quietly. "Now it's my turn." There was no time for argument. Distant hoofbeats echoed across the plains like a rolling drumbeat. Elijah reached into his saddlebag and handed Lucy a folded letter. "Give this to the marshal in Dry Bend. He'll know what to do." She took it, fingers trembling. "You better make it out." "I've made it out of worse," he said with a tired smile. He kissed Clara's forehead, then met Lucy's eyes one last time. "Ride." And she did. Lucy pressed her heels to the horse's flanks and took off across the open land, Clara gripping her waist, hair flying behind like smoke in the wind. She didn't look back. Elijah turned toward the southern ridge, where the first riders came fast and loud. He kicked his horse into a gallop, cutting a wide arc west, leaving a wide, visible trail. He fired 2 rounds into the air, baiting them with sound and fury. The outlaws roared after him, 8 riders or more, all faces twisted with vengeance. But Elijah had ridden these lands before. He knew the gullies, the ravines, the ways the moon cast false shadows, and the wind masked tracks. He led them deep into the canyon country, where the rocks rose like teeth and the air grew thin. He dismounted near a narrow choke point, an old mining path barely wide enough for a man on horseback. From here, only one rider could come through at a time. He waited. The first outlaw came too fast. Elijah shot him cleanly from the saddle. The second ducked low, firing wild. Elijah rolled aside and returned a bullet to the chest. Then it became smoke and thunder, gunpowder and yells, men cursing and horses screaming. Elijah moved like a shadow, always where they didn't expect, like the stories said he used to be. Crane the Gray, the man who ghosted through Apache passes, the scout who never missed twice. One outlaw threw a stick of dynamite, but it bounced wrong, fell short, and lit the sky behind Elijah in a bloom of fire. Dust flew. A horse reared and screamed. And still he stood, coat torn, face streaked with sweat and blood, reloading in rhythm like a war drum. But numbers caught up. A bullet tore through his side. Another grazed his leg. He dropped behind a fallen log, breathing ragged. There were 3 left. Maybe 4. He reached into his vest and pulled out one last round. It gleamed dully in the moonlight, a custom engraving along the casing. "Old debts," he muttered. "Paid in full." He chambered the bullet, waited for the next rider. The outlaw crested the ridge, pistol raised. Elijah fired. The man flew backward, arms wide, crashing against the rocks. The others faltered. Elijah rose slowly, blood seeping from his wounds, coat flapping like the wings of a dying crow. "Come on," he growled. But they turned. Even killers knew when a legend still breathed. By morning, Lucy and Clara reached the Silver Creek. The water ran clean beneath birch trees, and the white chapel stood like a promise. The priest brought them inside, gave Clara broth, wrapped her hands in cloth. Lucy handed the letter to the writer sent for Dry Bend. 2 days passed before news arrived. The posse found Elijah where the canyon opened again, collapsed beside his rifle, breath shallow but still drawing. "He's alive?" Clara asked. "Barely," the writer said. "He asked if the trade was good." Lucy smiled through tears. It was. In time, story spread of a quiet man who faced down a dozen outlaws with a single rifle, of a woman who rode into danger with her sister's face and her own gun, of a trade made in silence and paid in lead. And folks in the frontier towns began saying the legend hadn't died, just changed faces. Sometimes, when dusk falls and the wind howls through Dead Mare Pass, you can still hear it, the echo of a shot, and the sound of justice riding hard through dust and dusk.